Hello. Okay. 26. I went to the door and looked out. It had stopped raining, but there was a mist. Should we go upstairs? I asked the priest. I can only stay a little while. Come on up. We climbed the stairs and went into my room. I lay down on Rinaldi's bed. The priest sat on my cot that the orderly had set up. It was dark in the room. Well, he said, how are you really? I'm all right. I'm tired tonight. I'm tired too, but from no cause. What about the war? I think it will be over soon. I don't know why, but I feel it. How do you feel it? You know how your major is? Gentle. Many people are like that now. I feel that way myself, I said. It has been a terrible summer, said the priest. He was surer of himself now than when I had gone away. I cannot believe how it has been, except that you have been there and you know about it. No, and you know how it can be. Many people have realized the war this summer. Officers whom I thought could never realize it now. What will happen? I stroked the blanket with my hand. I do not know, but I do not think it can go on much longer. What will happen? They will stop fighting. Who? Both sides. I hope so, I said. You don't believe it? I don't believe both sides will stop fighting at once. I suppose not. It is too much to expect. But when I see the changes in men, I do not think it can go on. Who won the fighting this summer? No one. The Austrians won, I said. They kept them from taking San Gabriel. They've won. They won't stop fighting. If they feel as we feel, they may stop. They have gone through the same thing. No one ever stopped when they were winning. You discourage me. I can only say what I think. Then you think it will go on and on? Nothing will ever happen? I don't know. I only think the Austrians will not stop when they have won a victory. It is in defeat that we become Christian. The Austrians are Christians, except for the Bosnians. I don't mean technically Christian. I mean like our Lord. He said nothing. We are all gentler now because we are beaten. How would our Lord have been if Peter had rescued him in the garden? He would have been just the same. I don't think so, I said. You discourage me, he said. I believe and pray that something will happen. I have felt it very close. Something may happen, I said, but it will happen only to us. If they felt the way we do, it would be all right. But they have beaten us. They feel another way. Many of the soldiers have always felt this way. It is not because they were beaten. They were beaten to start with. They were beaten when they took them from their farms and put them in the army. That is why the peasant has wisdom, because he is defeated from the start. Put him in power and see how wise he is. He did not say anything. He was thinking. How I am depressed myself, I said. That's why I never think about these things. I never think, and yet when I begin to talk, I say things I have found out in my mind without thinking. I had hoped for something. Defeat? No, something more. There isn't anything more, except victory. It may be worse. I hoped for a long time for victory. Me too. Now I don't know. It has to be one or the other. I don't believe in victory anymore. I don't, but I don't believe in defeat, though it may be better. What do you believe in? In sleep, I said. He stood up. I am very sorry to have stayed so long, but I like so to talk with you. It is very nice to talk again. I said that about sleeping meaning nothing. We stood up and shook hands in the dark. I sleep at 3:07 now, he said. I go out on post early tomorrow. I'll see you when you come back. We'll have a walk and talk together. I walked with him to the door. Don't go down, he said. It is very nice that you are back. Though not so nice for you. He put his hand on my shoulder. It's all right for me, I said. Good night. Good night. Ciao. Ciao, I said. I was deadly sleepy. '27. I woke when Rinaldi came in, but he did not talk, and I went back to sleep again. In the morning, I was dressed and gone before it was light. Rinaldi did not wake when I left. I had not seen the Bencisa before, and it was strange to go up the slope where the Austrians had been, beyond the place on the river where I had been wounded. There was a steep new road and many trucks. Beyond, the road flattened out, and I saw woods and steep hills in the mist. There were woods that had been taken quickly and not smashed. Then beyond, where the road was not protected by the hills, it was screened by matting on the sides and over the top. The road ended in a wrecked village. The lines were up beyond. There was much artillery around. The houses were badly smashed, but things were very well organized, and there were signboards everywhere. We found Gino, and he got us some coffee, and later I went with him and met various people and saw the posts. Gino said the British cars were working further down the Bansisa at Raven. Raven. Ravne? He had a great admiration for the British. There was still a certain amount of shelling, he said, but not many wounded. There would be many sick now. There would be many sick now the rains had started. The Austrians were supposed to attack, but he did not believe it. We were supposed to attack too, but they had not brought up any new troops, so he thought that was off too. Food was scarce, and he would be glad to get a full meal in Gorizia. What kind of supper had I had? I told him, and he said that would be wonderful. He was especially impressed by the dulce. I did not describe it in detail, only said it was a dulce, and I think he believed it was something more elaborate than bread pudding. Did I know where he was going to go? I said I didn't, but that some of the other cars were at Caporetto. He hoped he would go up that way. It was a nice little place, and he liked the high mountain hauling up beyond. He was a nice boy, and everyone seemed to like him. He said where it really had been hell was at San Gabriel, and the attack beyond Laum that had gone bad. He said the Austrians had a great amount of artillery in the woods along Ternova. Ridge, beyond and above us, and shelled the roads badly at night. There was a battery of naval guns that had gotten on his nerves. I would recognize them because of their flat trajectory. You heard the report, and then the shriek commenced almost instantly. They usually fired two guns at once, one right after the other, and the fragments from the burst were enormous. He showed me one, a smoothly jagged piece of metal over a foot long. It looked like babbiting metal. I don't suppose they are so effective, Gino said, but they scare me. They all sound as though they came directly for you. There is the boom, then instantly the shriek and burst. What's the use of being wounded if they scare you to death? He said there were Croats, in the lines opposite us now, and some Magyars. Our troops were still in the attacking position. There was no wire to speak of, and no place to fall back to. If there should be an Austrian attack. There were fine positions for defense along the low mountains that came up out of the plateau, but nothing had been done about organizing them for defense. What did I think about Bansisa anyway? I had expected it to be flatter, more like a plateau. I had not realized it was so broken up. Alto piano, Gino said, but no piano. We went back to the cellar of the house where he lived. I said I thought a ridge that flattened out on top and had a little depth would be easier and more practical to hold than a succession of small mountains. It was no harder to attack up a mountain than on the level, I argued. That depends on the mountains, he said. Look at San Gabriel. Yes, I said, but where they had trouble was at the top where it was flat. They got up to the top easy enough. Not so easy, he said. Yes, I said, but that was a special case, because it was a fortress rather than a mountain anyway. The Austrians had been fortifying it for years. I meant tactically speaking, in a war where there was some movement. A succession of mountains were nothing to hold as a line because it was too easy to turn them. You should have possible mobility, and a mountain is not very mobile. Also, people always overshoot downhill. If the flank were turned, the best men would be left on the highest mountains. I did not believe in a war in mountains. I had thought about it a lot, I said. You pinched off one mountain, and they pinched off another, but when something really started, everyone had to get down off the mountains. What were you going to do if you had a mountain frontier? He asked. I had not worked that out yet, I said, and we both laughed. But I said, in the old days, the Austrians were always whipping in the quadrilateral, always whipped in the quadrilateral around Verona. In the old days, the Austrians were always whipped in the quadrilateral around Verona. They let them come down onto the plain and whipped them there. Yes, said Gino, but those were Frenchmen, and you can work out military problems clearly when you are fighting in somebody else's country. Yes, I agreed. When it is your own country, you cannot use it so scientifically. The Russians did, to trap Napoleon. Yes, but they had plenty of country. If you tried to retreat to trap Napoleon in Italy, you would find yourself in Brindisi. Terrible place, said Gino. Have you ever been there? Not to stay. I am a patriot, Gino said, but I cannot love Brindisi or Taranto. Do you love the Bansisa? I asked. The soil is sacred, he said, but I wish it grew more potatoes. You know, when we come here, we found fields of potatoes the Austrians had planted. Has the food really been short? I myself never had have never had enough to eat, but I am a big eater and I have not starved. The, the mess is average. The regiments in the line get pretty good food, but those in support don't get much. Something is wrong somewhere. There should be plenty of food. The dogfish are selling it somewhere else. Yes, they gave the battalions in the front line as much as they can, but the ones in back are very short. They have eaten all the Austrians' potatoes and chestnuts from the woods. They ought to feed them better. We are big eaters. I am sure there is plenty of food. It is very bad for the soldiers to be short of food. Have you ever noticed the difference it makes in the way you think? Yes, I said. It can't win a war, but it can lose one. We won't talk about losing. There is enough talk about losing. What has been done this summer cannot have been done in vain. I did not say anything. I was always embarrassed by the words sacred, glorious, and sacrifice, and the expression in vain. We had heard them sometimes standing in the rain almost out of earshot, so that only the shouted words came through, and had read them on proclamations that were slapped up by bill posters over other proclamations, now for a long time, and I had seen nothing sacred. And the things that were glorious had no glory, and the sacrifices were like the stockyards at Chicago if nothing was done with the meat except to bury it. There were many words that you could not stand to hear, and finally only the names of places had dignity. Certain numbers were the same way, and certain dates, and these with the names of the places were all you could say and have them mean anything. Abstract words such as glory, honor, courage, or hollow were obscene, besides the concrete names of villages, the numbers of roads, the names of rivers, the numbers of regiments, and the dates. Gino was a patriot, so he said things that separated us sometimes, but he was also a fine boy, and I understood his being a patriot. He was born one. He left with Peduzzi in the car to go back to Gorizia. It stormed all that day. The wind drove down the rain, and everywhere there was standing water and mud. The plaster of the broken houses was gray and wet. Late in the afternoon, the rain stopped, and from out number 2 post, I saw the bare, wet autumn country with clouds over the tops of the hills, and the straw screening over the roads wet and dripping. The sun came out once before it went down and shone on the bare woods beyond the ridge. There were many Austrian guns in the woods on that ridge, but only a few fired. I watched the sudden rounds, the round puffs of shrapnel smoke in the sky above a broken farmhouse near where the line was. Soft puffs with a yellow-white flash in the center. You saw the flash, then heard the crack, then saw the smoke ball distort and thin in the wind. There were many iron shrapnel balls in the rubble of the houses, and the road beside the broken house where the post was, but they did not shell near the post that afternoon. We loaded 2 cars and drove down the road that was screened with wet mats, and the last of the sun came through in the breaks between the strips of mattings. Before we were out on the clear road behind the hill, the sun was down. We went on down the clear road, and as it turned a corner into the open and went into the square arched tunnel of matting, the rain started again. The wind rose in the night. wind rose in the night, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, with the rain coming in sheets, there was a bombardment, and the Croatians came over across the mountain meadows and through patches of woods and into the front line. They fought in the dark, in the rain, and a counterattack of scared men from the second line drove them back. There was much shelling and many rockets in rain and machine gun and rifle fire all along the line. They did not come again, and it was quieter, and between the gusts of wind and rain, we could hear the sound of a great bombardment far to the north. The wounded were coming into the post. Some were carried on stretchers, some walking, and some were brought on the backs of men that came across the field. They were wet to the skin, and all were scared. We filled 2 cars with stretcher cases as they came up from the cellar of the post, and as I shut the door of the second car and fastened it, I felt the rain on my face turn to snow. The flakes were coming heavy and fast in the rain. When daylight came, the storm was still blowing, but the snow had stopped. It had melted as it fell on the wet ground, and now it was raining again. There was another attack just after daylight, but it was unsuccessful. We expected an attack all day, but it did not come until the sun was going down. The bombardment started to the south, below the long wooded ridge where the Austrian guns were concentrated. We expected a bombardment, but it did not come. It was getting dark. Guns were firing from the field behind the village, and the shells going away had a comfortable sound. We heard that the attack to the south had been unsuccessful. They did not attack that night, but we heard that they had broken through to the north. In the night, word came that we were to prepare to retreat. The captain at the post told me this. He had it in from the brigade. A little while later, he came from the telephone and said it was a lie. The brigade had received orders that the line of the Bensiza should be held no matter what happened. I asked about the breakthrough, and he said that he had heard at the brigade that the Austrians had broken through the 27th Army Corps up toward Caporetto. There had been a great battle in the north all day. If those bastards let them through, we are cooked, he said. It's Germans that are attacking, one of the medical officers said. The word Germans was something to be frightened of. We did not want to have anything to do with the Germans. There are 15 divisions of Germans, the medical officer said. They have broken through, and we will be cut off. At the brigade, they said this line is to be held. They said they have not broken through badly, and that we will hold a line across the mountains from Monte Maggiore. Where did they hear this? From the division. The word that we were to retreat came from the division. We work under the Army Corps, I said, but here I work under you. Naturally, when you tell me to go, I will go, but get the orders straight. The orders are that we stay here. You clear the wounded from here to the clearing station. Sometimes we clear from the clearing station to the field hospitals too, I said. Tell me, I have never seen a retreat. If there is a retreat, how are all the wounded evacuated? They are not. They take as many as they can and leave the rest. What will I take in the cars? Hospital equipment. All right, I said. The next night, the retreat started. We heard that Germans and Austrians had broken through in the north and were coming down the mountain valleys toward Civitale and Udine. The retreat was orderly, wet, and sullen. In the night, going slowly along the crowded roads, we passed troops marching under the rain, guns, horses pulling wagons, mules, motor trucks, all moving away from the front. There was no more disorder than in advance. That night, we helped empty the field hospitals that had been set up in the least ruined villages of the plateau, taking the wounded down to Plava on the riverbed. And the next day, hauled all day in the rain to evacuate the hospitals and clearing station at Plava. It rained steadily, and the army of Ben Caesar moved down off the plateau in the October rain and across the river where the great victories had commenced in the spring of that year. We came into Gorizia in the middle of the next day. The rain had stopped, and the town was nearly empty. As we came up the street, they were loading the girls from the soldiers' whorehouse into a truck. There were 7 girls, and they had on their hats and coats and carried small suitcases. 2 of them were crying. Of the others, one smiled at us and put out her tongue and fluttered it up and down. She had thick, full lips and black eyes. I stopped the car and went over and spoke to the matron. The girls from the officer's house had left early that morning, she said. Where were they going? To Canigliano, she said. The truck started. The girl with the thick lips put out her tongue again at us. The matron waved. The 2 girls kept on crying. The others looked interestedly out at the town. I got back in the car. We ought to go with them, Benella said. That would be a good trip. We'll have a good trip, I said. We'll have a hell of a trip. That's what I mean, I said. We came up the drive to the villa. I'd like to be there when some of those tough babies climb in and try and hop them. You think they will? Sure. Everybody in the Second Army knows that matron. We were outside the villa. They call her the Mother Superior, Benello said. The girls are new, but everybody knows her. They must have brought them up just before the retreat. They'll have time. I'll say they'll have time. I'd like to have a crack at them for nothing. They charge too much at that house anyway. The government gyps us. Take the car out and have the mechanics go over it, I said. Change the oil and check the differential. Fill it up and then get some sleep. Yes, Signor Tenente. The villa was empty. Rinaldi was gone with the hospital. The major was gone taking hospital personnel in the staff car. There was a note on the window for me to fill the cars with the material piled in the hall and to proceed to Pordenone. The mechanics were gone already. I went out back to the garage. The other two cars came in while I was there, and their drivers got down. It was starting to rain again. I'm so sleepy. I went to sleep 3 times coming here from Plava, Piani said. What are we going to do, Tenente? We'll change the oil, grease them, fill them up, then take them around in front and load up the junk they've left. Then do we start? No, we'll sleep for 3 hours. Christ, I'm glad to sleep, Vanilla said. I couldn't keep awake driving. How's your car, Amo? I asked. It's all right. Get me a monkey suit and I'll help you with the oil. Don't you do that, Tenente, Amo said. It's nothing to do. You go and pack your things. My things are all packed, I said. I'll go and carry out the stuff that they left for us. Bring the cars around as soon as they're ready. They brought the cars around to the front of the villa, and we loaded them with the hospital equipment, which was piled in the hallway. When it was all in, the 3 cars stood in line down the driveway under the trees in the rain. We went inside. Make a fire in the kitchen and dry your things, I said. I don't care about dry clothes, Piani said. I want to sleep. I'm going to sleep on the major's bed, Benello said. I'm going to sleep where the old man corks off. I don't care where I sleep, Piani said. There are 2 beds in here. I opened the door. I never knew what was in that room, Benello said. That was old Fish-Face's room, Piani said. You 2 sleep in there, I said. I'll wake you. The Austrians will wake us if you sleep too long, Tenente, Benello said. I won't oversleep, I said. Where's Amo? He went out in the kitchen. Get to sleep, I said. I'll sleep, Piani said. I've been asleep sitting up all day. The whole top of my head kept coming down over my eyes. Take your boots off, Benello said. That's old Fish-Face's bed. Fish-Face is nothing to me. Piani lay on the bed, his muddy boots straight out, his head on his arm. I went out to the kitchen. Amo had a fire in the stove and a kettle of water on. I thought I'd start some pasta esquiata. Esquieta, he said. He'll be hungry when we wake up. We'll be hungry when we wake up. Aren't you sleepy, Bartolomeo? Bartolomeo? Not so sleepy. When the water boils, I'll leave it. The fire will go down. You'd better get some sleep, I said. We can eat cheese and monkey meat. This is better, he said. Something hot will be good for those 2 anarchists. You go to sleep, Tenente. There's a bed in the major's room. You sleep there. No, I'm going up to my old room. Do you want a drink, Bartolomeo? When we go, Tenente. Now it wouldn't do me any good. If you wake in 3 hours and I haven't called you, wake me, will you? I haven't any watch, Tenente. There's a clock on the wall in the Major's room. All right. I went out then, through the dining room and the hall, and up the marble stairs to the room where I had lived with Rinaldi. It was raining outside. I went to the window and looked out. It was getting dark, and I saw the 3 cars standing in line under the trees. The trees were dripping in the rain. It was cold, and the drops hung to the branches. I went back to Rinaldi's bed and lay down and let sleep take me. We ate in the kitchen before we started. Amo had a basin of spaghetti with onions and tinned meat chopped up in it. We sat around the table and drank 2 bottles of the wine that had been left in the cellar of the villa. It was dark outside and still raining. Gianni sat at the table very sleepy. I like a retreat better than an advance, Bonello said. On a retreat, we drink Barbera. We drink it now. Tomorrow, maybe we drink rainwater, Amo said. Tomorrow we'll be in Udine. We'll drink champagne. That's where the slackers live. Wake up, Gianni. We'll drink champagne tomorrow in Udine. I'm awake, Piani said. He filled his plate with the spaghetti and meat. We may drink before Udine, Piani said. I'm awake, Piani said. He filled his plate with the spaghetti and meat. Couldn't you find tomato sauce, Barto? There wasn't any, Amo said. We'll drink champagne in Udine, Bonello said. He filled his glass with the clear red Barbera. We may drink before Udine, Piani said. Have you eaten enough, Tenente? Amo asked. I've got plenty. Give me the bottle, Bartolomeo. Bartolomeo. I have a bottle apiece to take in the cars, Amo said. Did you sleep at all? I don't need much sleep. I slept a little. Tomorrow we'll sleep in the king's bed, Bonello said. He was feeling very good. Tomorrow maybe we'll sleep in, Piani said. Sleep in blank, Piani said. I'll sleep with the queen, Bonello said. He looked to see how I took the joke. You'll sleep with blank, Piani said sleepily. That's treason, Tenente, Bonello said. Isn't that treason? Shut up, I said. You get too funny with a little wine. Outside it was raining hard. I looked at my watch. It was 9:30. It's time to roll, I said, and stood up. Who are you going to ride with, Tenente? Bonello asked. With Amo. Then you come, then Piani. We'll start out on the road for Cormans. I'm afraid I'll go to sleep, Piani said. All right, I'll ride with you. Then Bonzello, then Amo. That's the best way, Piani said, because I'm so sleepy. I'll drive and you sleep a while. No, I can drive just so long as I know somebody will wake me up if I go to sleep. I'll wake you up. Put out the lights, Barto. You might as well leave them, Benello said. I've got no more use for this place. I have a small locker trunk in my room, I said. Will you help take it down, Piani? We'll take it, Piani said. Come on, Aldo. He went off into the hall with Benello. I heard them going upstairs. This was a fine place, Bartolomeo IMO. Bartolomeo IMO said. He put 2 bottles of wine and half a cheese into his haversack. There won't be a place like this again. Where will they retreat to, Tenente? Beyond the Tagliamento, they say. The hospital and the sector are to be at Pordenone. This is a better town than Pordenone. I don't know Pordenone, I said. I've just been through there. It's not much of a place, Amo said. Probably the emo or something. '28. As we moved out through the town, it was empty in the rain and the dark, except for columns of troops and guns that were going through the main street. There were many trucks, too, and some carts going through on other streets and converging on the main road. When we were out past the Tenaries onto the main road, the troops, the motor trucks, the horse-drawn carts, and the guns were in one wide, slow-moving column. We moved slowly but steadily in the rain, The radiator cap of our car, almost against the trail board of a truck that was loaded high, the load covered with wet canvas. Then the truck stopped. The whole column was stopped. It started again, and we went a little farther, then stopped. I got out and walked ahead, going between the trucks and carts and under the wet necks of the horses. The block was farther ahead. I left the road, crossed the ditch on a footboard, and walked along the field beyond the ditch. I could see the stalled column between the trees in the rain, and I went forward across from it in the field. I went about a mile. The column did not move, although on the other side beyond the stalled vehicles I could see the troops moving. I went back to the cars. This block might extend as far as Udine. Piani was asleep over the wheel. I climbed up beside him and went to sleep too. Several hours later, I heard the truck ahead of us grinding into gear. I woke Piani, and we started, moving a few yards, then stopping, then going on again. It was still raining. The column stalled again in the night and did not start. I got down and went back to see Ayemo and Bonello. Bonello had two sergeants of engineers on the seat of his car with him. They stiffened when I came up. They were left to do something to a bridge, Bonello said. They can't find their unit, so I gave them a ride. With the Sir Lieutenant's permission. With permission, I said. The lieutenant is an American, Bonello said. He'll give anybody a ride. One of the sergeants smiled. The other asked Bonello if I was an Italian from North or South America. He's not an Italian. He's North American English. The sergeants were polite, but did not believe it. I left them and went back to Ayemo. He had two girls on the seat with him and was sitting back in the corner and smoking. Barto, I said. He laughed. Talk to them, Tenente, he said. I can't understand them. Hey. He put his hand on the girl's thigh and squeezed it in a friendly way. The girl drew her shawl tight around her and pushed his hand away. Hey, he said. Tell the Tenente your name and what you're doing here. The girl looked at me fiercely. The other girl kept her eyes down. The girl who looked at me said something in a dialect I could not understand a word of. She was plump and dark and looked about 16. Sorella? I asked and pointed at the other girl. She nodded her head and smiled. All right, I said, and patted her knee. I felt her stiffen away when I touched her. The sister never looked up. She looked perhaps a year younger. Amo put his hand on the elder girl's thigh and she pushed it away. He laughed at her. Good man, he pointed at himself. Good man, he pointed at me. Don't you worry. The girl looked at him fiercely. The pair of them were like two wild birds. What does she ride with me for if she doesn't like me? Amo asked. They got right up in the car the minute I motioned to them. He turned to the girl. Don't worry, he said. no danger of blank, using the vulgar word for blank, using the vulgar word, no place for blank. I could see she understood the word, and that was all. Her eyes looked at him very scared. She pulled the shawl tight. Car all full, Amo said. No danger of blank, no place for blank. Every time he said the word, the girl stiffened a little. Then, sitting stiffly and looking at him, she began to cry. I saw her lips working, and then tears came down her plump cheeks. Her sister, not looking up, took her hand, and they sat there together. The older one, who had been so fierce, began to sob. I guess I scared her, Amo said. I didn't mean to scare her. Bartolomeo brought out his knapsack and cut off 2 pieces of cheese. Here, he said, stop crying. The older girl shook her head and still cried, but the younger girl took the cheese and commenced to eat it, to eat. After a while, the younger girl gave her sister the second piece of cheese, and they both ate. The older sister still sobbed a little. She'll be all right after a while, Amo said. An idea came to him. Virgin? He asked the girl next to him. An idea came to him. Virgin? He asked the girl next to him. She nodded her head vigorously. Virgin too? He pointed to the sister. Both the girls nodded their heads, and the elder said something in a dialect. That's all right, Bartolomeo said. That's all right. Both the girls seemed cheered. I left them sitting together, with Amo sitting back in the corner, and went back to Piani's car. The column of vehicles did not move, but the troops kept passing alongside. It was still raining hard, and I thought some of the stops in the movement of the column might be from cars with wet wiring. More likely they were from horses or men going to sleep. Still, traffic could tie up in cities when everyone was awake. It was the combination of horse and motor vehicles. They did not help each other any. The peasants' carts did not help much either. Those were a couple of fine girls with Barto. A retreat was no place for two virgins, real virgins, probably very religious. If there were no war, we would probably all be in bed. In bed I lay me down my head. Bed and board, stiff as a board in bed. Catherine was in bed now between two sheets, over her head and over her and under her. Which side did she sleep on? Maybe she wasn't asleep. Maybe she was lying, thinking about me. Blow, blow, ye western wind. Well, it blew, and it wasn't the small rain, but the big rain down that rained. It rained all night. You knew it rained down that rained. Look at it. Christ, that my love were in my arms and I in my bed again. That my love Catherine, that my sweet love Catherine down might rain. Blow her again to me. Well, we were in it. Everyone was caught in it, and the small rain would not quiet it. Good night, Catherine, I said out loud. I hope you sleep well. If it's too uncomfortable, darling, lie on the other side, I said. I'll get you some cold water. In a little while, it will be morning, and then it won't be so bad. I'm sorry he makes you so uncomfortable. Try and go to sleep, sweet. I was asleep all the time, she said. You've been talking in your sleep. Are you all right? Are you really there? Of course I'm here. I wouldn't go away. It just doesn't make any difference between us. You're so lovely and sweet. You wouldn't go away in the night, would you? Of course I wouldn't go away. I'm always here. I come whenever you want me. Blank, Piani said. They've started again. I was dopey, I said. I looked at my watch. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I reached back behind the seat for a bottle of the Barbera. You talked out loud, Piani said. I was having a dream in English, I said. The rain was slacking, and we were moving along. Before daylight, we were stalled again, and when it was light, we were at a little rise in the ground, and I saw the road of the retreat stretched out far ahead. Everything stationary, except for the infantry filtering through. We started to move again, but seeing the rate of progress in the daylight, I knew we were going to have to get off that main road some way and go across country if we ever hoped to reach Udine. In the night, many peasants had joined the column from the roads of the country, and in the column there were carts loaded with household goods. There were mirrors projecting up between mattresses and chickens and ducks tied to carts. There was a sewing machine on the cart ahead of us in the rain. They had saved the most valuable things. On some carts, the women sat huddled from the rain, and others walked beside the carts, keeping as close to them as they could. There were dogs now in the column, keeping under the wagons as they moved along. The road was muddy. The ditches at the side were high with water, and beyond the trees that lined the road, the fields looked too wet and too soggy to try to cross. I got down from the car and worked up the road away, looking for a place where I could see ahead to find a side road we could take across country. I knew there were many side roads, but did not want one that would lead to nothing. I could not remember them because we had always passed them bowling along in the car on the main road, and they all looked much alike. Now I knew we must find one if we hoped to get through. No one knew where the Austrians were, nor how things were going, but I was certain that if the rain should stop and planes come over and get to work on that column, that it would be all over. All that was needed was for a few men to leave their trucks or a few horses to be killed to tie up completely the movement on the road. The rain was not falling so heavily now, and I thought it might be clear. I went ahead along the edge of the road, and when there was a small road that led off to the north between two fields and a hedge of trees on both sides, I thought that we had better take it and hurried back to the cars. I told Piani to turn off and went back to tell Bonello and Amo. If it leads nowhere, we could turn around and cut back in, I said. What about these? Bonello asked. His two sergeants were beside him on the seat. They were unshaven, but still military looking in the early morning. They'll be good to push, I said. I went back to Amo and told him we were going to try it across country. What about my virgin family? Amo asked. The two girls were asleep. They won't be very useful, I said. You ought to have someone that can push. They could go back in the car, Amo said. There's room in the car. All right, if you want them, I said. Pick up somebody with a wide back to push. Bersaglieri, Amo smiled. They have the widest backs. They measure them. How do you feel, Tenente? Fine, how are you? Fine, but very hungry. There ought to be something up that road that we will stop and eat. And we will stop and eat. How's your leg, Tenente? Fine, I said. Standing on the step and looking up ahead, I could see Piani's car pulling out onto the little side road and starting up it. His car showing through the hedge of bare branches. Bonello turned off and followed him, and then Piani worked his way out, and we followed the two ambulances ahead along the narrow road between hedges. It led to a farmhouse. We found Piani and Bonello stopped in the farmyard. The house was low and long with trellis with a grapevine over the door. There was a well in the yard, and Piani was getting up water to fill his radiator. So much going in low gear had boiled it out. The farmhouse was deserted. I looked back down the road. The farmhouse was on a slight elevation above the plain, and we could see over the country, and saw the road, the hedges, the fields, and the line of trees along the main road where the retreat was passing. The two sergeants were looking through the house. The girls were awake and looking at the courtyard, the well, and the two big ambulances in front of the farmhouse, with three drivers at the well. One of the sergeants came out with a clock in his hand. Put it back, I said. He looked at me, went in the house, and came back without the clock. Where's your partner? I asked. He's gone to the latrine. He got up on the seat of the ambulance. He was afraid we would leave him. What about breakfast, Tenente? Bonello asked. We could eat something. It wouldn't take very long. Do you think this road is going down on the other? Do you think this road going down on the other side will lead to anything? Sure. All right, let's eat. Gianni and Bonello went in the house. Come on, Amo said to the girls. He held his hand to help them down. The older sister shook her head. They were not going into any deserted house. They looked after us. They are difficult, Amo said. We went into the farmhouse together. It was large and dark, an abandoned feeling. Bonello and Piani were in the kitchen. There's not much to eat, Piani said. They've cleaned it out. Bonello sliced a big cheese on the heavy kitchen table. Where was the cheese? In the cellar. Piani found wine, too, and apples. That's a good breakfast. Piani was taking the wooden cork out of a big wicker-covered wine jug. He tipped it and poured a copper pan full. It smells all right, he said. Find some beakers, Barto. The two sergeants came in. Have some cheese, sergeants, Bonello said. We should go, one of the sergeants said, eating his cheese and drinking a cup of wine. We'll go, don't worry, Bonello said. An army travels on its stomach, I said. What? Asked the sergeant. It's better to eat. Yes, but time is precious. I believe the bastards have eaten already, Piani said. Sergeants looked at him. They hated a lot of us. You know the road? One of them asked me. No, I said. They looked at each other. We would do best to start, the first one said. We are starting, I said. I drank another cup of the red wine. It tasted very good after the cheese and apple. Bring the cheese, I said. He looked at it regretfully. I guess it is, he said. Give me the canteens to fill. He filled the canteens, and some of the wine ran out on the stone paving of the courtyard. Then he picked up the wine jug and put it just inside the door. The Austrians can find it without breaking the door down, he said. We'll roll, I said. Gianni and I will go ahead. The two engineers were already on the seat beside Bonello. The girls were eating cheese and apples. Amo was smoking. We started off down the narrow road. I looked back at the two cars coming in the farmhouse. It was a fine, low, solid stone house, and the ironwork of the well was very good. Ahead of us, the road was narrow and muddy, and there was a high hedge on either side. Behind, the cars were following closely.